Hi everyone, my name is Steph, this is the Novelty Corner and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about all the books that I have read in the past week. Most of you will be very familiar with this series. It is a weekly series on my channel and I love wrapping things up in a weekly fashion because otherwise I forget the details. This was my first week back at work for the year and can I tell you how tired I was? Very, very tired. So if I am a little bit hazy on the details this week, that is why. But I read 7 things, a couple of review titles, which was great because it meant I got those ticked off my list. And yeah, let's talk about them. All right, so the first book that I read this week was Ashes of You by Cowles. This is the 5th and final book in the Lost and Found series, which is a small town romantic suspense series. Again, clearly living in a small town is fraught with danger because everyone has been kidnapped, stalked, murders happen every other month, and that sounds vaguely terrifying to me, but you know, that's the general setup for a romantic suspense story or series. This was a review copy. I have been reading and reviewing the entire series and I have enjoyed it. I will caveat that the MMC for this story is a cop, so just be aware of that going into it because that is something that we need to talk about because that is problematic, but it is also a very staple employment role in a romantic suspense story. It is the story of Lawson and Hallie. Lawson is a single dad. He has 3 boys, 16 and under, and his boys were just hilarious characters in the story. He really needs help. His family are great. They all help take care of the kids, but he is just struggling on a daily basis because they all go to different schools. One's in primary school, one's in middle school, one's in high school. They all have different after school commitments and he's just finding it really hard to keep up. And so he has been trying to find a nanny for his kids for most of the series, and he is quite particular in who he wants, and there are some doozies that he interviews in the start of this book. And then there is Hallie, who is a young woman who went through a very traumatic experience. She was kidnapped and tortured by a serial killer, and she survived, she escaped, and Lawson was part of the search and rescue group that originally found her. And she applies for this nannying position, not realizing who Lawson is because they never actually were formally introduced. He just happened to be there when she was rescued. It is an age gap story and it does deal quite heavily with her trauma. She has PTSD and a lot of anxiety around many things, but she loves working with kids. She's very good with the boys to the point where she creates space, particularly for Lawson's teenage son who has quite a lot of resentment and is struggling to reconcile why his parents separated and why they don't have a relationship with his mother. And Hallie is very calm and lets him have that space to work out how he feels about having Hallie in their lives. You also have that found family element because Lawson's entire family and their now spouses and children and whatever are all involved. Ultimately, I'm kind of sad the series is done because I did enjoy the characters, and as much as, you know, the thought of living in this small town scares the crap out of me, I quite liked visiting it every now and then in books. I also read another book that I had out for review, which was Against All Odds by C.W. Farnsworth. This is book 2 in the Holt Hockey series, which I read the first book last week, Famous Last Words. This is a college hockey series, and you guys know how notoriously picky I am about my college hockey romances because if you're going to write a college age story, I don't want the immature behavior, but I mean, that's what college is. I'm just an old person now. I'm just an old person. Thankfully, these 2 characters are a little bit more mature. I mean, Aidan, who is the MMC, is a bit of a playboy. He is in his senior year, he's playing on the hockey team, he is the second line centre for his team. At the start of the book, he gets called into his coach's office because he has failed one of his classes and he is at risk of losing his spot on the team. However, the coach doesn't want to lose him from the team, so he has organised with Aidan's professor that he can resit the exam and then he's going to participate in mandatory tutoring to make sure that he doesn't fail a second time. The tutor happens to be the coach's daughter who has transferred to Holt University to complete her final year, and unbeknownst to the coach and to Aidan, the coach's daughter is a woman that he has had a one-night stand with. Completely randomly, they never exchanged names or contact numbers. They just had this one moment during the most recent break, and suddenly they are forced to spend time together while she is tutoring him for a class he doesn't actually need tutoring for. He just doesn't take things too seriously and thought he could fly by the seat of his pants in the exam and failed. All of the work that she gives him, and look, to be honest, the tutoring in here doesn't really happen for lots of different reasons. But every time she sets him a task, he knows how to do it. He just doesn't take things seriously. But failing the class and potentially losing his spot on the team is enough to shake him out of that apathy. And so he does study. And then he also can't get Rylan out of his mind. And so he is determined to prove to her that he can change his playboy partying ways and that he can be serious and that he is head over heels for her. One of the things that I really liked about this book, and in particular about Aidan's character, was that it's commented many times because his best friend is the first line center on the team and is the star, and he was the main character in Famous Last Words. One thing that's pointed out is because they are like third division or something like that, like in any other team, Aidan would have been the first line center on that team. And he also has quite good leadership skills, but he just never thought to apply it because he's not trying to get into the NHL. He's not trying to take it further. And throughout the course of this book, he really finds himself inspired to step up and to do better. And it was just, that was a really interesting storyline. It's not particularly unique, but the way that it was handled, I thought, was just well done. Then I read Witchblood by L.L. Frost, which is the second book in the Demonic Messes and Other Annoyances series, which is one of the series that I'm trying to complete this year. I love this series. It is polyamorous paranormal romance and is highly delightful. It's essentially Pen and Flint and Mark getting caught up in the ritual death of someone within the witch's temple, and this causes a lot of friction because the world at large knows that paranormal beings exist, and certain groups, including the witches, have decided to keep the outside world out of their business. And so the murder and bringing in Detective Sharp from the paranormal division of the police force causes some issues because suddenly they are trampling all over the witch's business and they don't like that. What's really interesting is sort of the reveal in this one, because what we've been building to since the first book is that Pen, Flint and Mark have had a relationship with Sharp at some point, but Sharp doesn't know why. And we know that the other three, there's a sadness around the fact that he doesn't know, and that he keeps doing things that disappoint them because he doesn't know. And so we get the reveal of who Sharp is and how they all fit together. And I just really want to read the next book. Like I really, really want to read it because I just want to see where this goes next. Because on top of that, we have Mark, who also has a demon riding his body, and the demon is starting to assert more and more control over everything. It's just a really fun time to read. I think all of the books are something like 400 pages long, but they're very, very fast reads. I realized in this book, because this heavily references another character or another series of characters, that there is another series that sort of took place before this. I don't think you need to have read it because I was totally fine, but I'm like, oh, now I really want to go read that series as well because I just want to know how everything fits together. If that doesn't just tell you how my brain works, I don't know what else does. It's like, ooh, shiny, I need to read that thing. Game On by Amy Aislin. This is the third and final book in the Vancouver Orca series, and I'm really sad that this series is done as well. You might notice that I have a physical copy of this and that it was not part of my book buying fund. That's because this is an active series that I'm reading and have been collecting, so I was allowed to buy it. Yes, I have exceptions to my rules because of course I do. Anyway, I really wanted to get the illustrated edition to match the rest of the illustrated editions that I have because this also has illustrations inside. I love that some authors are commissioning art to be included in their books. It just makes my heart happy. So the Vancouver Orca series is a series that follows three cousins who live in Vancouver. And in this case, we have Jamie, who is not one of the cousins, but he is a hockey player. He's broken off his engagement with his fiancée the day before the wedding, and his fiancée was the younger brother of the captain of his hockey team. And since the breakdown of that relationship, which was mutual and amicable, Jamie had found that his team was quite difficult to be around because the captain and the captain's friends were just making his life miserable. And so he asked to be transferred. And he's ended up on the Vancouver Orcas, who are an AHL team. And once he gets there, he has been offered a room to stay at Dorian's place. Dorian is the cousin of the head coach of the Vancouver Orcas, and is quite happy to host someone staying in his place because he's got the room, and the two hit it off. Dorian is the temporary social media manager for the Vancouver Orcas team, and he's also trying to launch his own subscription box service, which I think is just such a fun setup, and the way that he talks about it is amazing. It's kind of like a small local artist subscription service for Vancouver creatives, and it's just delightful. This book is a forced proximity, roommates to lovers story. There are dogs, and the whole thing is just sweet and fluffy and just absolutely gorgeous. I love this so much. I also reread Faded Blades by Ilona Andrews. This is for the Kinsman Universe read-along that I'm doing with Heather, Izzy and Megan. This is our final book, and I'm sad that it's done, but I was so glad that I got to reread it because I got to finally tab it up because I haven't reread it since I picked up the physical copy. This is also one of my favorite illustrated painted artwork covers. Like I love it so much. This is the story of Ramona and Matthias, and the two of them come from rival families. Their families have been rivals for generations. And this book is set on New Delhi. It is a sci-fi world. There are people who have been genetically modified to contain weapons in their body, and they are the Sakare. And both Ramona and Matthias are Sakare, and their families have built up these rival business empires. And so they're rivals in every sense of the word, until Ramona turns up at Matthias's office and shows him a video of her husband and his wife cheating on them, having just stolen proprietary information from both their companies. This forces them to team up temporarily to go after their spouses, to recover the information, and to stop a greater invasion force that is trying to use the information that the two of them have developed to build better soldiers. And it's great. Like, they have a common goal, they have a common enemy, and along the way they realize that their skill sets and their training have allowed them to synchronize, which is something that is rare and precious amongst the Sakare, particularly from their history when they were basically designed as soldiers. It combines dance and martial arts and is just lovely. It's barely 200 pages long, but it's a slow burn. It's so good. There are just these pockets of scenes that live rent-free in my brain. Like, they end up being forced to spend a couple of days in this temple in the woods, and it's just one of my favorite things. Like, it feels atmospheric and it allows them to actually understand each other. Like, it's great. And then the final book that I read this week was another review copy, this one from NetGalley, so I get to tick another square off on that part of my bingo board. And it was A Love Song for Ricki Wilde by T. Williams. This is T. Williams' most recent book. It's coming out this month. I love this. It is really interestingly told. I don't think this is going to work for everyone in terms of the narrative storytelling style, but it was really fun because there's kind of this third-person narrator who is also a character in the story, telling the story of Ezra and Ricki. So Ricki is the youngest of 4 girls in her family. Her father owns a funeral business empire that his oldest 3 daughters have all bought into, and they see themselves very much as high society. And Ricki, being the youngest by 15 years, is the free spirit of the family. She just doesn't quite fit the mold. She does everything her own way, and she's determined to open her own florist business. She is passionate about it. She likes creating unique floral designs, and her family don't really respect her from that. In fact, her sisters are quite awful. They're really quite awful. And one day Ricki meets Della, who is an older woman whose husband has passed away, and she's come into the funeral home, and she and Ricki get to talking, and Ricki ends up sharing her dreams of opening this florist. It turns out that Della lives in Harlem and has a beautiful old brownstone, and the bottom floor apartment is available for use. And so Della invites Ricki to use the space and to utilize it for her business. And so Ricki gets her start that way. And it's not all smooth sailing at all for Ricki. She struggles initially, but she's also deeply enamored with the history of Harlem, and she spends a lot of time touring Harlem and leaving her designs at historic sites from Harlem's history, and using social media to build a profile of her love of the history of the town, but also her business, which sounds really awesome. And then she also begins to cross paths with this mysterious guy called Ezra. He is determined to not keep seeing her, but they just can't avoid each other. And interspersed with all of this, we get stories of Harlem in the 1920s, I think, and a young musician called Breeze, who has just come to town and is trying to build a name for himself. And we get to see the interweaving of these two stories and how they come about. This is very much a magical realism story because it is still very much rooted in contemporary romance, but with a magical realism element. And I can't really say what it is, and I can't even really give you a comparison, because if I give you a comparison and I've got a really great one, the whole thing just, it's a giant spoiler. For me, this was really interesting because I don't know a lot about Harlem. It was really fascinating. I really did enjoy it. I will say, it's not an overly long book. It's only about 350 pages, but it did at times feel a little bit slow, but I think it was more because I wasn't expecting the writing style, which, as I said, was just different to what I was expecting to get, and a little bit quirky, which was good. Like, it's really nice. Also, this cover is stunning. Like, it's an absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous cover. All right, so those are the books that I have read this week. In the comments, feel free to let me know if you have read any of them or if you're planning on picking them up. I will leave all of the links where you can check out more information about them down below. If you want to let me know that you're here but you don't want to leave a comment, feel free to leave music notes, emojis down below. Otherwise, I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're staying safe and healthy, and I will see you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, everyone.